teissTalk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us, and welcome one and all once again to teissTalk. The last time I saw many of you was just before the Teiss R3 conference. So I'm really glad to see you again back here live as usual. We have a few technical difficulties, nothing I'm sure we can't get through, but yes, we're a little bit late, so my apologies for that. This week we've got a great conversation about building a more inclusive cybersecurity team, and I barely need to remind you of all people, dear audience, that do ask your questions, because the winner gets a teissTalk mug. No less, no less. It's a very much wanted and desired item. So without further ado, let me bring on to stage our two wonderful speakers. They are Lisa Ventura and Sam Masiello. Lisa and Sam, welcome.
Good to be here again, Tom. Thank you.
Hello, thank you.
And hello, Sam.
Good to be here.
Jolly good. Very good to see you both. Right, let's crack on, shall we? Let's move straight on to the news item. So the news item is up there on your screen. Just click it to take a look. And that will take you through to friends of the show, IT Security Guru, and an article titled "The Power of Diversity, Building Stronger Cybersecurity." So the first point here, I think, which is one that's worth raising and one I want to sort of bring straight away to our panelists, is diversity is a challenge, but one we must embrace. Do those two statements strike true for either of you?
I'm happy to come in on that first, Tom, if I may. So as you can see from the article, it's still a huge problem to get those. We've got a huge cyber skills gap, and having those diverse teams is really important in our industry. I think it's getting a little bit better, but I also think that a lot of organizations still have a lot to do to really fully embrace diversity and the benefits that having a diverse workforce can bring for them. For example, I'm going into doing some training, so I can go into organizations to talk to them about the benefits of having, especially a neurodivergent workforce, and the benefits that can bring to organizations. So I think it's getting better, but as the article says, I think there's still quite a bit to be done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As you think about information security, I would say that diversity within the InfoSec space has largely been a challenge always. I mean, you think about the people that largely make up the cybersecurity workforce. It's generally white males. There isn't a lot of diversity within the space. There aren't very many women in cybersecurity. I think the latest stats that I saw say that about 10–12% of the cybersecurity workforce is women. And so when you think about just the diversity that exists in that space, it really isn't. It's lacking, and it's been known for a long time, right? This while certainly the importance around things like diversity and equity and inclusion is something that has gotten a lot more attention recently. It's certainly something that those of us who have been in the space for a long time have realized that it's an area where there's a lot of work to be done.
And it's not easy, is it? I think, again, as the article says, it's a challenge. It's not just let's hire more diverse people. There's a whole lot of other considerations we have to take into account.
May I come in a little bit on what Sam was saying there, especially in terms of the lack of women coming into the industry? We could have a whole other talk, I think, on just this one subject alone, which is that I think that cybersecurity and InfoSec in general has quite an image problem. And by that, I mean we need to get over a lot of the imagery, the darkness about it, the little script kiddie with his hoodie, over the laptop, etc. I speak to so many women that want to come into the industry and say that they actually feel that it's not for them. And a lot of the time it's because of that sort of dark imagery that doesn't really, appeal. I don't know what the answer is, but that could be a whole other talk on its own.
Mm.
Well, I can imagine being a woman.
And that's one of the challenges that we've.
Sorry. I think, being a woman, it may also be somewhat intimidating, right, to potentially try to enter a space where, it is predominantly male and as much as I hate to say male culture, right, I think there is whether it's true or not, there is a feeling that it might exist there, and that might be something that, is preventing women from potentially wanting to be more engaged in the space. So I think as we look at, as leaders, how we can do a better job of becoming more diverse, I think it starts with us, right, to make sure that we are fostering cultures by which people feel as if they have a space where they can feel welcomed and that their ideas are taken seriously. Because as you think about the InfoSec space and just diversity in general, I feel like that there's a lot to be gained by having a more diverse workforce and a more diverse culture. You think about how we innovate, right? And the ideas that can come from a more diverse culture and a more diverse workforce, and some of the ideas that can be brought to the table by having people with different backgrounds and having people with different ideas and having people that came from different places that can really, I think, from a security standpoint, benefit how we evolve as an industry. And I feel like that's one of the things that potentially has been holding us back over time, is the fact that we have not been as inclusive as we should be and have not developed the diverse workforces that we should. And as a result, I feel like that we have not advanced as quickly as an industry as we probably could have or should have to keep up with our adversaries. Because we're coming from a place of kind of having the same ideas, where bringing people in from different backgrounds can help us do a better job of figuring out how can we potentially be looking at solving the problems that we're trying to solve on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I think our audience is probably on the more enlightened side of things here. They probably feel that they've got, they don't have an image problem. They have a diverse workforce, etc. But a lot of that will come across as subconscious bias. They will think, well, it's not me because I've set up an environment that is welcoming, that is going to be much more inclusive. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. There's, are there other examples that you can think of that people might think of as being inclusive, but actually put people off? Some practices that well-intentioned people will have that don't actually help.
I can come in on that a little bit from my perspective. So it can be even down to things like, where you work. So rather than insisting that you have people in the office, all the time, 5 days a week, it has got a lot better since the pandemic. There are a lot more remote roles, hybrid roles. But as the discussion point says, there is no one size fits all approach. So one person might be great full-time in an office environment 5 days a week. Another might need that hybrid mix. Another, and this is me, I cannot do an office environment. I have done it. I did it for many years. Never understood why I struggled with it so much. And I struggle with it because I'm very open about the fact that I'm neurodivergent. I'm diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And for years, I struggled massively with the sound, the lights, the noise, interruptions, even down to if I was working in an office environment and there was a kitchen nearby, certain smell or something cooking, and I couldn't then focus for the rest of the day because that smell was just so all-encompassing. That was my day, just got gone. And I know it sounds insane, but that's the sort of thing that really bothered me from a sensory perspective. So I only really started to thrive once I made that change to working full-time from home. And that was actually in 2015 before the pandemic hit. So it is all about recognizing that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, and working with each individual so that they can talk about what their needs are. So I'm going to be launching a campaign soon, which is going to be around hashtag My Neurodivergent Needs. And I also had a really interesting call this morning with someone that's going to be launching a neurodivergent passport, which will contain everything that person needs to help them thrive and do their best work and the best setup and in the best way possible, rather than trying to sort of shoehorn them into things and ways that just aren't going to be appropriate for them.
Yeah, I think the one-size-fits-all approach is something that certainly companies are going to have to continue to try to find some kind of balance for. Because as Lisa was mentioning, during the pandemic, I think people got used to working remote, and there was this belief among some that working remote was going to be kind of where everything was going to go. But the reality is that companies spend a lot of money on real estate, and there was always going to be at some point in time some push, some drive to get people back into the office. And so, while a lot of cybersecurity folks love the idea of 100% remote work, I think the reality for a lot of people is that the sweet spot is really going to be finding what works best for people, right? There are people who aren't effective working at home because maybe there are too many distractions, the dog, the kids, the laundry, the lawn, all the other things that kind of go into, maintaining a home and working from home. But at the same time, there are also a lot of people who have a lot of distractions working in the office as well that make it a fairly unproductive environment for them, and in some cases even a very stressful environment for them, because of the fact that they feel as if as Lisa was saying, all the ambient noise, the distractions, everything else, make it very difficult for them to concentrate and make it very difficult for them to feel like they could be productive in their jobs. And so I think this is an opportunity where companies need to think about this from a broader perspective and think, how do we need to make sure that we're accommodating our employees in such a way that they can be productive and stress, or have less stress in their jobs. But also, as from a leadership perspective as well, we need to be having those discussions with our employees to make sure we understand how best we can accommodate the needs of our employees as well, because we brought them on to do a job. We brought them on because they're good at what they do. And so we need to make sure that from a leadership perspective, we're putting them in the environment that'll help make them most successful. In my home as well, I have a few neurodiverse folks in the home. I have my wife has ADHD. I have 2 kids with ADHD. My wife has anxiety. And so one of the things that I've learned over time is that you have to work with people in very different ways, because they all have very different needs with respect to what makes them successful. Like my oldest kid, for example, as Lisa was saying, does not function well in environments where there is a lot of noise, a lot of distraction. And so they work very often with headphones on. And if you think about that in a workplace environment, right, that can be perceived in a negative way. That could be perceived as someone who maybe is a loner, isn't a team player, doesn't want to work with other people, when in fact all they're really trying to do is put themselves in an environment where they can be more productive and feel like they're in a safe space where they can do their work. And so there's a lot of stigma sometimes that goes around in people trying to, let's say, conform, but maybe conform is the right word, right, to being able to work in an environment that the company wants them to work in, but at the same time, it's not necessarily the best environment for them. So as leaders, we need to figure out how to best work with our people.
Absolutely. I'm happy to come in on that, because I had that exact experience.
And I'm going to pick up on a point that both you...
Sorry, John.
Sorry, I was going to pick up on a point that both you and Lisa made very shortly, but I just want to tell a tweet, I think it was, or an X, whatever it is nowadays, that I saw the other day about a chap who said that he'd been going into the office 5 days a week for nearly 30 years and then had to work from home post-pandemic. And now post-pandemic is incandescent with rage that he has to go in 1 to 2 days a week, and finds it utterly unacceptable, which does go to show quite how, not only how things have changed, but also how people's attitudes have changed, etc., and how they've sort of have adapted to this completely different way of working, and how it's seen as actually important. It's important to people's working lives. But to loop back on something you said there, Lisa, about the passport scheme, as it were, what it is that's required to allow people to work effectively. And also, to Sam's own experience of, living with people with multiple different needs. That's quite a challenge for any employer, to be honest, right? And that's, and I'm not trying to diminish this as an issue and as something we need to address, but it's quite a challenge. We know we can't do one size fits all, but can we meet every single requirement of every single employee in a realistic and, well, frankly, profitable way?
I'll come in on that, Tom. And I think you're right. It is about finding that balance. I can only talk about my experience because I'm doing some work at the moment with an organisation called teissTalk. Big global organisation, offices and thousands of members of staff all over the world. And my introduction to them, my onboarding, everything, and I've been with them for a little while now, the whole lot was all done remotely. And I hold them up as an example of it can be done. Now, I know that there are a lot of organisations that will say, oh, you need to have the face-to-face interaction. You can't have that team cohesion, without it. I can tell you, I did quite a few months with teissTalk before I even met a single person in person, face-to-face, which was last June when I went to InfoSec. Up until then, everything I'd done, every meeting, every call, everything was all done on Teams or online. Did it make me any less productive? Absolutely, not. Did it make me not gel with everybody that I had to work with? Absolutely not. So it can be done. And I do hold teissTalk up as a really great example of that whole onboarding end-to-end process.
And Tom, to your question, I don't think necessarily that while certainly the needs of the employees can potentially be very widely vary, that doesn't necessarily mean that the company needs to do like wide sweeping things in order to accommodate those needs either, like Lisa was saying. But also, if you think about like what are some of the things that companies can do? Maybe there's a private room that people can work in when they get overwhelmed, right? There's a lot of companies have what are called phone booths that people can work in, right? That people can go in if they need to. Maybe it is working from home on a more regular basis, right? Instead of coming in every day, maybe they come in one day a week. Maybe they work from home entirely. Maybe it's some other space that provides fewer distractions or is more comfortable to folks. Maybe it's the noise canceling headphone approach we were talking about earlier that my oldest kid uses to help drown out noises, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is a wide sweeping or significant change that is accommodating every single employee across the company. Sometimes there are just little things that can be done that make a big difference in someone's ability to be able to feel comfortable and have less stress in what they do.
Yeah, absolutely true. So, okay, so we, there's things we can do as employers. There's things we can do. There's accommodations we can make. There's middle ground that we can meet on, etc. There's also, and I think whilst this is not unique to neurodiverse people working in the industry, but potentially is more acute because of the potential for overstimulation, etc., etc. But recognizing burnout, and I think that's difficult enough, with people who aren't neurodiverse. That's probably even harder with people that is, especially when you combine that with people who you are not seeing physically face to face every day. Is this an issue that we need to focus quite heavily on because of the sort of the double whammy, or is it just treated in the same way as we would treat burnout with anyone else?
I mean, I can come in a little bit on that, just in terms of recognizing the signs of burnout. It's something I've spoken, out about a lot. and how it is such a big problem in our industry. And you can find that it's often, characterized by a few things, which is, somebody perhaps having some cynicism and less identification with their jobs. They may have some feelings of reduced professional ability. They may be, taking a bit more time off than normal as well. They might seem a bit more irritable, impatient or wound up. They might be, seemingly uninterested in their role and in life in general. And some people have even gone as far as to have some suicidal feelings around that when it's really, really bad. So I think just being able to sort of look at people and recognize when, things just might not be quite right, and that they might be, at risk of burnout is really important.
Yeah. And I'd add on to that to say that, burnout in general is a real thing, even in cybersecurity in general. There are lots of folks in cybersecurity who end up leaving the profession, and leaders who end up leaving their roles because of burnout. But I also think there's a strong connection between the conversation we were just having around barriers to maximizing performance and burnout, right? I mean, if we can help eliminate some of those barriers, then hopefully we can help eliminate some of the burnout issue as well. But I also think that, kind of tying all this discussion together, I think by being able to increase the diversity that we have in our teams, we can help to close some of the talent gaps that exist within cybersecurity. I mean, we were talking earlier about, the number of cybersecurity jobs that are left open. I think some of the reason that people have burnout is because of the increased workload that they have because of the talent shortage that exists. Well, if we can leverage, if we can do a better job of building more diverse teams, and hopefully we can help fill some of that talent gap, which could hopefully help fill some of the issues that people are experiencing with burnout. So I like all this does potentially tie together if you think about it from the perspective of, how one problem or solving one problem can potentially help solve another problem. But as I said earlier, that burnout has been a big thing in cybersecurity for a long time, right? It's a thankless job. When things are operating well and there are no incidents, not a lot of attention is paid to the cybersecurity team, and some people enjoy that, but some people also appreciate getting the attaboys every now and again when a job is being done well. But people don't necessarily know when a job is being done well in cybersecurity because nothing's happening, right? There is no event happening. But then when something does happen, fingers point very quickly, and there's lots of questions being asked as to what the cybersecurity team is doing, how did they miss this, that sort of thing. And so those sorts of things also end up leading to burnout because of the fact that when something does happen, people are like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm getting yelled at when things go poorly. I never hear anything when things are going well. And so, that lack of appreciation, I would say, does work or does weigh pretty heavily on folks. But as you think about burnout again, going back to the kind of conversation of burnout, there are some other things that we can be looking at too that kind of tie burnout and performance maximization together as well. We were talking a little bit earlier about environmental things that you can do to potentially make the environment more productive, like maybe it's more remote work, maybe it's something to help cancel out the noise in the environment. But other things to consider, like maybe it's more frequent or shorter breaks, right? Being able to step away for a little while and be able to kind of mentally reset yourself. Maybe somebody who has ADHD may struggle to work long hours and focus on something for a long period of time. And so being able to take those longer or more frequent breaks may help someone to be able to focus better and be more productive. Maybe it's the workspace, right? My oldest kid that I've talked about a couple times now also has significant issues sometimes with organization. And so maybe providing some tools at the desk, if they're working at a desk, to be able to help them with organization can also help lower some of those stress levels as well. So there's lots of things talking about earlier about the things companies can do to help reduce that stress. Helping reduce that stress can also help reduce the burnout.
Yeah, it's like treat your people like human beings and do a good job as a manager would often be seen as the how to avoid burnout in anyone, right?
That's right. Yeah, no, we're talking about a very specific use case here, but to your point, right? The same issues that that neurodiverse folks are experiencing are being experienced by everybody as well. It just manifests in a different way. It has to be managed in a different way. And as leaders, we have to make sure that we are aware of those things, and quite frankly, are more empathetic towards them as well.
Mm. Now, Lisa, I'm very interested in hearing some sort of personal experiences, and even on the prep call, we spoke about some of those. And maybe a good example of of someone meeting you halfway and someone embracing the neurodiversity in order to allow you to be as successful as possible versus somewhere that doesn't. I mean, if you're happy to, are you able to share some practical examples there?
Absolutely. So a few years ago, and obviously the conversation around this has grown, quite a lot since then. But I remember being in one work environment and I had some noise cancelling headphones on. As we were talking about earlier, that was just to block out the noise and, just keep things, to a minimum so I could be more productive. And I remember being barked at to, remove them and put them away because wearing those headphones showed that I wasn't a team player and I wasn't integrating with everybody else. So that was one classic example. But another of where I've been met halfway is requesting sort of downtime in between calls and meetings, and especially after going to events and conferences, which can be extremely overwhelming for me, especially if I have to to be always on and talking to people over the course of a couple of days or so. I really do need that significant downtime. And I'm actually having conversations with a lot of event and conference organizers about providing some quiet areas or breakout spaces that people can go to if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed and need to have that downtime. A classic example of where it really affected me was actually this year. I went to InfoSec in June, and I couldn't do all 3 days. I only went down for 2 days, and it was just absolutely constant. I mean, it was lovely in some ways that I had people approaching me and, hi, how are you and how's it going, and want to have conversation. But there were even times when I was sat outside the main areas catching up with people that I'd had actually made arrangements to do so with, and other people would just pull up a chair and join in the conversation and not really sort of think that I was having a one-to-one meeting or talk with someone.
A time, I don't know, a moment to yourself.
That's exactly it. And so a friend of mine actually made me, I don't know if you can see it, but she made me a badge that actually talks about sensory overload, that if I'm showing that badge and somebody approaches me, I can just hold it up and it says, please excuse me, if you see this sign, I'm taking a silent break from interacting with others. And that's been really, really helpful and useful for me. And I've used it at a couple of events already, and I wish I'd had it sooner. And it's not that I don't want to talk to people, it's just that I'm in that place where it's all just got that little bit too much. And if that badge is on, that just means, hang on a minute, I'm having a bit of a quiet time. Can I just have that respected? And I hopefully will be able to catch them and talk to them later.
Yeah. So half an hour through, and I honestly thought that the main chat window had broken on me, but we've now got 2 questions coming, so at least we know we can get rid of one of these mugs. So the first question, which is from Lynn Coventry's, which is a very good one. I like this. How do you convince employers not to take advantage of someone who will always say yes and do more until they burn out?
So I'll jump in on that one. So for me, and there's lots of folks who especially in cybersecurity, right, who are people pleasers, and they want to they want to say yes, they want to be helpful, but at the same time that can also lead to, oh, I have all this other stuff I have to do, and now people are asking me to do these additional things. I don't want to say no because I don't want to be perceived as a department of no, which is certainly something that cybersecurity has been as a brushstroke that cybersecurity has been painted with in the past. So how do I still service the business without necessarily overloading myself and burning myself out? That's where, from a leadership perspective, you should be having regular one-to-one conversations with your employees and understanding, like, what are the things that they're working on? What are the things that people are potentially coming to them for that maybe you're not aware of? Or maybe redirect the conversation so that people are coming to you as the leader to help manage that workload. But ultimately, right, it's having those one-to-one discussions and making sure from a priority perspective that you align on what are the things that they should be working on. If there are things that other people are asking for that they can't do right now, then have the manager go back and say, while I appreciate the fact that you need this done, we have some other priorities we have to accomplish, and that this is how we're going to manage that person's workload to make sure we can still do your thing, but at the same time, we're going to do it in this certain order of operations. And then that way, not only does the employee feel a bit more supported because they know their manager has their back, but also they understand what their priorities are, what they need to work on, and the order they need to work on them, as opposed to thinking they need to do it all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So we also have another question here from Sarah Templey, which again is an interesting one. It's something, is this something that we should be really concerning ourselves with? So not all diversity is visible, absolutely, and not everyone will feel comfortable declaring something such as their neurodiversity. Are there good practices for how you can support people in your team if they haven't declared their neurodiversity? And the first thing that springs to mind is, how have you ascertained that, in your opinion, they're neurodiverse, right? This is potentially overstepping boundaries, but with good intention.
Absolutely, Tom. I'm happy to come in on this one, because even after my diagnosis, I didn't divulge it for a long time. I didn't feel comfortable divulging it for a long time. But I guess from my side, it was that I would be perceived as less because of it, or less competent, or even disabled in some way, which of course it is. But I know that I'm good at what I do, and I'm good at my job. So there was kind of that fear that if I disclosed it, then maybe I wouldn't be needed anymore, or there would be some what's the word? I guess not animosity, but some towards me. So it was always really difficult for me to sort of go into somewhere and say that I'm autistic or have ADHD. But I don't know, as time's gone on, as I've got a bit older, I've kind of embraced it, a lot more now. And, you're right, I can look around and see, people with traits that I recognize. And I think they either have diagnosed or undiagnosed neurodivergent conditions. So it is all about, but that's because I'm kind of attuned to that, I think, a lot, and sort of looking for, those similar traits that I have, and I try to sort of spot them in other people. But it can be quite difficult to approach somebody with that, especially if they want to keep it quiet. I mean, when I sort of came out and said that I was autistic, quite a few people said, "I'm not surprised," at all, or said, "Well, and you're autistic. Well, so what?" So. I think it's removing that stigma, that fear, I think, of divulging it.
I would say as a leader, right?
It's quite challenging. I think it's around. It seems to be that a lot of the answers to these questions are treat your people like human beings and do your job as a good manager, right?
But it's also being willing to listen too, right? I mean, if your employees are asking for certain things to help make them more productive, but also don't be afraid as a manager to have the discussions with your employees on, like what can I be doing for you, right? What are some of the things that you're doing a great job. What are some of the things that I can help make you more comfortable in the office? And it doesn't necessarily have to be because you think they're uncomfortable. It's just a matter of like, you just part of regular discussion as part of being an empathetic leader. Because today, I think hopefully there is more awareness around neurodiversity and the fact that there are neurodiverse people in your workforce, whether you recognize it or not, they are there, and better understanding how they feel comfortable working. It's a conversation we should be having as part of those one-to-ones, and creating, quite frankly, a safe space where hopefully our employees feel comfortable having those conversations with us, and maybe eventually, divulging if they are neurodiverse. But at the same time, even if they don't, then they should feel comfortable asking for the things that they feel that they need to help make them more productive. And it doesn't even have to be a conversation around neurodiversity. It's just more a matter of how as an employee can I help make sure that you are getting the most out of your workday, and as a company that we are getting the most out of you as an employee. It's a two-way. It's an easy two-way conversation to have. It doesn't necessarily have to center around someone's individual diagnoses.
And how do we operate effectively as a team? Which we'll do this final question here from Hendrik, which is, how to realize as an organization your cybersecurity team members with different neurodiverse mindsets keep working together and motivate each other in order to prevent burnouts or becoming adversaries to each other. And I think that's your point exactly there, Sam, which is how do we actually work together more effectively as a team, recognizing that neurodiverse or not, we are different.
That's right. Exactly right.
Excellent. So let's draw to a close here, shall we? So I often ask my closing question for panelists here is almost always the same, and I'll do the same this time. So the one thing I ask is, what is the one thing that our audience should be doing when they go back to their desks tomorrow morning? What's the one practical thing they should be doing? Be that ascertaining if they do have neurodiverse people on their team, ascertaining how they might make it more diverse generally. But Lisa, let me start with you. What is the one thing you think people should be doing?
Absolutely, Tom. So I think be supportive of any workplace adaptations that you can do, and not necessarily as a result of any requests that you have in. So that could be as simple as more flexible working hours, the working from home and hybrid working, providing those breakout or quiet spaces. And here's one that many might not think of, but being mindful of bright colors or patterns in the office. That's something that I know many others that are autistic can't sort of cope very well with. I have a lot of sort of neutral tones everywhere. Having downtime between calls and meetings, and letting them use headphones, noise cancelling headphones if they need to block out noise. And you can improve workplace well-being as well by having a good well-being system in place, such as an employee assistance program, providing clear information of what and who to go to for support. And also, I'm actually a qualified mental health first aider, so I think that they're just as important as regular first aiders. So, knowing who those people are that others can go to, for support and to talk and to get that sort of clear assistance from.
Yeah, and I would say as a leader, creating that culture within your team and within your workplace that really, quite frankly, is independent of individual diagnoses, but also one that allows people to be able to feel like that they are supported, right? As Lisa was saying, right, are supported in the workplace and feel like that they have someone that they can speak to regarding their individual needs. But still creating that culture within the environment such that people feel like that they can feel comfortable coming to you to have that conversation and be prepared and willing to have those conversations, but also potentially be proactive in having those conversations as well, and don't necessarily wait for your employee to come to you and say, hey, these are some things that would help make me better, happy, more productive employee. Have those conversations proactively and ask those questions. Don't necessarily wait for someone to come to you and say they have an issue or that they need some potentially need some particular accommodations, whether it be, longer break times or different working hours or whatever, have those conversations with them up front to better understand how they are productive as a person. Because as we've talked about over the course of this conversation, everyone's different. Everyone has different needs. Everyone has different ways that they are productive. And so just creating that culture up front can help potentially even make those conversations easier and have your employees more willing and able and comfortable coming to you to have those conversations themselves without necessarily having to be asked anything.
Yeah. Excellent, folks. Lisa, Sam, thank you so much for your contributions today. Much appreciated. It just remains for me to award the Tice mug, of course, and it's going to go to Lynn Coventry, not just for the question that they provided, but also for giving me a sense of relief that the chat function on my desktop was actually working. So Lynn, you'll be contacted for your details and where to send your teissTalk mug. One other thing before we close, our next session is on the 2nd of November, and is on the subject of helping colleagues recognise and learn from their risky behaviour. I'm assuming by risky behaviour, we're talking about cybersecurity risky behaviour. I'm pretty sure we're not that interested in other elements of that, but we shall see. Thank you all for seeing us through to the end here. If there have been any technical issues, it's primarily because of my system, apparently. I've not been able to see either of our panelists or even hear them particularly well this week, but hopefully we'll be back to technology normal next time we meet. So once again, Lisa, Sam, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And for the audience, stay secure, my friends.